The supremacist assault on incumbency, we see it as a response, not simply to a supremacist instinct.
What you just saw is an international debate that has been sparked under Trump's administration right after Ibrahim Rasul's statement. The South African ambassador has openly accused US President Donald Trump of being a white supremacist, raising questions about a serious diplomatic rift. The relationship between the countries was smooth until 2018, when Trump ignited controversy and tweeted about land expropriation in South Africa, claiming that white farmers were being targeted and their land had been forcibly taken. The statement was widely criticized within South Africa, with government officials calling it misleading and alarming.
Erroneously stating that their land and farms were being confiscated. So let's get more details now, right, and bring in SABC News correspondent Sharon Rice.
It wasn't just that one tweet either. Trump's earlier tenure was marked by several comments about Africa that many perceived as dismissive or outright offensive.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa.
Even reports emerged of him using derogatory language to describe African nations during a closed-door meeting in his early tenure. Fast forward to today, those tensions are now resurfacing the other way, but the primary cause seems to be that same tweet made by Trump years ago. And there has been an ongoing debate since the return of the Trump administration about their so-called legality issues. People are criticizing him for his racial discrimination, and that's what the South African ambassador highlighted when he sat down for the webinar, where the topic of Trump's potential return to power came up. So, from here, things took a dramatic turn.
The majority of South Africans want, and not as horrific. There are no confiscations taking place, and it's a very orderly law of land reform.
Ibrahim Rasul wasted no time and, without a hint of hesitation, bluntly stated that Donald Trump had aligned himself with white supremacist ideologies. He cited Trump's rhetoric, his approach to racial issues within the United States, and his past interactions with African nations as clear evidence of this alignment. The directness of Rasul's statement was striking, leaving little room for ambiguity. His remarks, delivered with a firm conviction, immediately sparked reactions from those attending the webinar. Some nodded in agreement, while others appeared visibly uncomfortable. The statement was undeniably bold, given the diplomatic weight of the discussion. The webinar's audience seemed momentarily stunned by Rasul's words, as if they hadn't anticipated such a direct accusation. However, what followed was even more telling. Despite the strong claims, South African authorities have yet to ask Rasul to clarify or defend his remarks. This silence, whether strategic or incidental, only fueled further speculation about the broader implications of his statement. While some viewed it as an overdue truth spoken candidly, others saw it as an unnecessary provocation with diplomatic consequences.
He described him as a race-baiting politician, adding that the Trump administration has nothing to discuss with him.
The swift reaction to the controversial statement was nothing short of extraordinary. Within hours, political analysts, news outlets, and social media platforms were abuzz with heated debates and impassioned responses. Trump's allies were quick to dismiss the ambassador's comments as reckless, accusing South Africa of meddling in US politics. They argued that such a public denunciation not only violated established diplomatic protocols, but also risked undermining years of carefully maintained international relationships. Critics among this group went as far as calling for an official condemnation from Washington, asserting that the ambassador had overstepped his diplomatic bounds and endangered a vital bilateral relationship. On the other side of the debate, many progressive voices embraced the statement. They contended that the ambassador had spoken a truth that many world leaders have been too cautious to articulate. For these supporters, the remarks were seen as a bold confrontation of issues that are often ignored in mainstream political discourse. They believed that by labeling the US president a white supremacist, the ambassador was challenging deep-seated political and historical narratives, forcing a public reckoning with the legacy of racism and inequality. But why did South African Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul do this? Many are now calling him as the relationship at this point has gone very low.
So, characterizing Donald Trump as an assault on incumbency in the state and in the world. You can't do that as an ambassador.
But to understand his reasoning, we have to look at the broader context of Trump's past statements, policies, and affiliations. Throughout his political career, Trump has faced accusations of racial insensitivity and even outright racial bias, claims that his supporters vehemently deny, but that his critics say are well documented. Just like the instance of Trump's hesitation to condemn white nationalist groups, most notably during the 2017 Charlottesville protests, was a defining moment. His infamous remark that there were very fine people on both sides was interpreted by many as a dog whistle to extremist groups, although Trump later clarified his comments, saying he condemned white supremacy, but then the damage was already done in the eyes of many, including international observers. Then there's his immigration stance, where his administration put harsh words on migrants, his references to predominantly black and brown nations as S-hole countries, and his calls to limit immigration from Africa all played a role in shaping his global image. So that's exactly what could be the precise moments that Ambassador Rasul likely had in mind when he made this explosive statement. These factors might have made it impossible for Rasul to stay silent because he is representing a country that has fought tirelessly to dismantle institutionalized racism. To him, this might not just be about politics and politicians, but about standing up for principles, even if it meant causing a diplomatic crisis. Honestly, Trump's initial silence prepared us for the thunder, because earlier he repeatedly denied that he does not support extremists. His reluctance to call out groups like the Proud Boys, at one point telling them to stand back and stand by, has fueled the perception that he enables and emboldens white nationalist sentiment. But what happened next was something we never imagined. Shortly after the interview aired and the controversy exploded, Trump's administration took action, and what they did was expel the South African ambassador in a short notice of 72 hours.
The ambassador was provided any advance warning that he was about to be declared persona non grata by Donald Trump's Secretary of State.
Now, this symbolic slap as persona non grata wasn't something expected, because being expelled as a diplomat is one of the harshest punishments a country can impose in response to a foreign official's statements or actions. It's a clear message that the US government saw this as an unforgivable offense. For Trump's allies, this was an appropriate consequence. They argued that an ambassador has a responsibility to maintain diplomacy, not make inflammatory remarks about the US president. In their eyes, Ibrahim Rasul overstepped his role, and expelling him was the only logical outcome. But for others, the reaction was disproportionate. Was a single interview really enough to justify expulsion? Would the US have taken the same action if the remark had been directed at a different political figure? Many South Africans saw this move as an aggressive overreach, questioning why Trump, who has made plenty of controversial statements himself, was being shielded from criticism in such an extreme way. This punishment sent shockwaves across the world, as well as raised many questions about the retaliation that was meant to send a larger message indirectly.
Here in South Africa, this move by Washington disregards the set, systems of engagement which are diplomatic.
And now the world is eyeing South Africa's next move. Will it be diplomatic or defiance? So, where does South Africa go from here? Expelling an ambassador is supposed to affect trade relations, foreign policy, and even the way ordinary South Africans are perceived in the US. The South African government now faces a delicate balancing act.
Down the line, have channels of communication where these things can be ventilated, disagreements can be discussed, and common cause can be the goal here. But
what should be the next move? Should they push back against Trump's decision, defending their ambassador and standing firm on their stance against racial injustices? Or should they attempt to de-escalate, reaffirming their commitment to the US-South Africa relations while making it clear that their concerns about Trump's legacy remain unchanged? Either way, it's not going to be easy if South Africa takes a hard stance and refuses to back down. It could strain ties with the US, especially if Trump returns to power. And if they soften their approach, they risk looking like they are backtracking on their principles. At this point, it is important for South Africa to maintain their position but emphasize diplomacy. Instead of engaging in direct retaliation, they could reaffirm their commitment to international partnerships while doubling down on their stance against racism, making it clear that the statement wasn't meant as an attack on the US as a whole, but rather an honest assessment of Trump's past actions, and ensure that this controversy does not derail broader cooperation on trade, security, and global initiatives. At the end of the day, this situation is bigger than just one statement and one expulsion. It represents a larger reckoning about race, power, and diplomacy, and a test of free speech and diplomatic tolerance. How a global superpower responded set up a clear message for the rest of the world. This political scandal redefined a global moment, and it will have consequences long after the headlines fade. And no matter what happens next, the world will be watching. So if you want to see what's coming next, just hit that like button and subscribe to stay tuned on future updates. Bye.